Welcome back to What the Theory with your guy Joel, and my name is Joel. Today's episode is going to be a follow-up on the discussion that we had about, the capitalist ideology. The first one was a discussion of the middle class and why I think it's a myth. So if you want to check out that video, just, first follow, like, subscribe. You'll find that video talking about the middle class myth. And today I want to talk about one of the concepts that Adam Smith had, and that's the idea of the invisible hand. I'll read you this quote. "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages." So I guess the idea that we've all had is that by pursuing our own self-interest, collectively, we mutually find beneficial ways to serve each other. I cannot take everything that I have, take everything that I want, because then there will be repercussions. I will be ostracized from some society. As George Costanza said, we live in a society. And by living in a society, you need to find a way in which you provide something beneficial. So by doing something for others, you are in turn doing something for yourself. And the idea is that the invisible hand of the market is where those needs are expressed and those needs are met by those people who are supplying it. So the invisible hand moves besides the intentions of the individuals. I might be making, dildos. I might be making dildos because I know people want to use them either as ornaments or for other activities. Now, I might only be interested in selling those dildos. I don't know how many times I'm going to say dildos. I'm going to sell those artifacts only because I want to get money. I really don't care about you, and I don't have to care about you. And that is espoused as part of the benefits of a market system, is that it doesn't matter if you're a woman, a man, if you're trans, if you vote Republican, if you vote for NRM, if you vote for Bobby Wine, doesn't matter. You can always obtain assets within the marketplace because no one has to care about what your ideologies or thoughts are. It's just a matter of, do you have this need and do you have effective demand for you to be able to pay for those goods and services? Now, that rationale makes sense, I think, even to me. That's the ideology of the world. However, there's an argument to be made about what that invisible hand actually does and why it's called invisible. It's, I guess, a metaphor because the products of capital are not just the commodities that result from the productive process. It is also the relationships of the people that produce those goods and services. If you remember what I was saying earlier, the butcher, the brewer, the candlestick maker, for instance, they are defined by what it is that they produce. And by living in a polis, by living in a society, to use the words of Aristotle, the polis comes before the family. And Aristotle was not a fool, to put it lightly, in talking about genealogies. Of course, he knows that human families came before larger human societies and polises. What he means is the polis is what gives identification, what gives the roles that people play in any community. By saying someone is someone's father, you're referring to the obligations that they have to their children or to their partner. If someone is someone's brother, sister, if you're a painter, we're referring to the responsibilities and the things that you offer. And that means that the definition of what you are comes from what you do for everyone else. So those relationships, capitalism doesn't only produce goods, but it produces relationships between different people, those who have and those who have to use the things that those people have in order to create something. And that invisible hand is not only working to direct, capitalists so that they can earn something. So in my mind, I was always very anti-communist, very anti-socialist, because I thought, well, it's people who have gripes, it is resentment. And to some extent, there are definitely people who have those gripes. And with, all due respect, it's because, there's, in the words of Engels, the history of capitalism has been written in blood and fire. It's destroyed and torn asunder so many things. If you read the Communist Manifesto, the power of the capitalist movement was that it dissolved old feudal relations. So before capitalism became the dominant ideology, the relationship was one of people who owned land, people who had titles, monarchies, and everyone else was a subject to those. And as the mercantile class started to grow, they decided to dissolve those issues. They found a way in which owning stuff was more powerful than having symbolic power. But the problem is that symbolic power has just simply transferred to the merchants, to the extent now that merchants and government and the ruling class have become one and the same. But it's no individual person who is, to blame for this. And that's the thing that we miss. The invisible hand acts not only on the demand side, but also on the supply side. If you're a capitalist and say, you decide to be, let's use Jeff Bezos as an example. Jeff Bezos is probably the one person in this world who is obsessed with the customer. He's always talking about customer satisfaction. He was willing to lose money for so many years trying to refine a certain experience for people. His mind was constantly focused on how can people have the best appreciation of the services that they're going to be obtaining, the best products that they're able to get. And that focus even goes beyond, just amassing capital. But it is the means by which he has been able to amass capital. If, say, you start up a business and decide you're going to pay people fairly, you're going to give them more than what is benchmarked on the market, most of the time you'll find that the market is going to bring you back down to the average. Why? Because you will no longer be competitive. You will no longer be able to have the ideology keep reproducing itself. And so often you'll find in a boardroom, you'll have to take decisions that if you are found outside of that boardroom, you probably wouldn't be able to defend. You have to abstract away the fact that costs are rising and you need to let go of some labor, and you refer to it as labor or a human resource, when in fact you're getting rid of people. You are, in a sense, choosing the abstract over the real. Now, I can't blame anyone for that. I mean, no one created the system. We all were born into it. And that's the point, that it keeps reproducing itself. There will be more and more capitalists that are created. Some of them will come out of the working class. Some of them will be just born into existing power structures. And there will always be people who have to sell their labor and their time. And there is always going to be conflict between those two classes. And the thing about modern life is we think it's less violent, that we think that we no longer have these battles. Instead, I would submit that those battles have become more nuanced. If you think of the typical workplace has you regimented, you know what you're supposed to do from when you come in to when you leave. Most of human society was not arranged that way. Even when kings had serfs, the king wouldn't come and tell you how to grow your crops. The king wouldn't tell you when to start. The king wouldn't tell you when to finish. He would just say, I demand that you give me 10% of whatever it is that you've produced. So you determined your work day, you knew when to rest, you knew when to save. It was more or less the burden was left with you, and you just knew what you're supposed to pay. And that was the nature of the relationship. But as more and more demand is being made of the people who work and produce, you can't be made aware of the conditions under which you have to produce. And so, you have things like cool parties at work. You have, we're a nice family here at the office. You get to have nice perks and benefits, and, flatter structures are encouraged. But those flatter structures are probably a means by which you can feel more humane at work. You can feel more like a person. And don't get me wrong, I think those are good developments. I just think that they cover over rather than reveal the issue, in which we're saying, is this the way we want to relate to each other? The alienation that comes from that kind of invisible hand moving all our actions is that you do things that you do not intend to do, and you serve an ideology above yourself. So you're working, you're pushing, you're trying to find yourself in a process that is alienating to you. And the worst effects of it are that the human being starts to only feel like themselves when they are away from the one thing that is a human effort, that is our species being, and that is work. Contrary to what I used to think, I don't find that the idea behind moving against communism, being anti-capitalist, isn't anti-work. And some people are definitely anti-work. I think there are those groups. But the idea is how to liberate work from the current structures that exist, that you can own your labor, that you can have choices, not the illusion of choice. You're often told that you're free to choose, but if your choice is starve on the street or serve someone else, then really you don't have a choice. You're given the illusion of different products that you can consume, but you don't have the choice not consume, because the economy runs on consumption. We're told daily that the GDP has to keep growing and growing and growing, and you have to keep buying. iPhone, I think 14 just came out. There's someone I know still has an iPhone 7. It barely works, and it's not allowed to keep working, but it works fine. And we're told that, the capitalist engine makes the best products. But wouldn't the best product be something that you could buy and that would last for years and you don't have to replace it, as opposed to forced obsolescence? The story of the light bulb, I think, is probably the best. I mean, there were light bulbs that could last 20, 30 years, but that's not good for business, because effectively that means you could sell out light bulbs and then wait. You're just replacing a few every year, rather than making some that will, blow out within 6 months. So the ideology always comes first, and it reproduces not only the commodities, but it reproduces the relationships. And those relations start to become the material basis by which we judge each other, by which we live, by which we start to even value each other. You see someone's title and see what they earn, and somehow they are above you in society. And I think that is the kind of relation that we don't want, but we seem to be stuck in thinking that this is just the way it has always been. Communism in the Soviet Union, behind the Iron Curtain, failed miserably. I think it failed miserably because it still carried that capitalist ideology. All it did was call it the state. I think there's a way in which we need to re-examine those relationships, and only by having these conversations can we have other options. The dangerous thing is when an ideology becomes the only option in town. And I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone does. I suppose the question is, if we're not asking the questions, then we're never going to be able to get closer to something that we can try out. We'd rather fail trying to be ourselves, trying to achieve the things that we want, than to continue to complain and toil and smile and say that this is just the way life is. We only have one life, and what better way to spend it than by trying to find a way to make the things that we think are ideal become true. There is no conflict between having ideal desires and also being pragmatic. That's what it means to be progressive. So stay progressive. Bye.